So I know this is an answer that nobody really wants to hear, and it's a conversation people don't really want to have, but it's dire with the defensive line. I've talked about it a little in the film room. I've talked about it a little here, but I really wanted to dive into it here when it comes to the offseason priorities. So right now, under 2024 contract for the defensive line for the Buffalo Bills, you've got across the entire defensive line, across the entire defensive line, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, Ilianku, Kingsley Jonathan, and Cameron Klein. You've got 3 edges and 3 defensive tackles right now. And your 3 edges are Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, Kingsley Jonathan, your 3 defensive tackles, Ed Oliver, Ilianku, and Cameron Klein. The following defensive linemen from 2023 are current UFAs for the Buffalo Bills: Linval Joseph, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Kendall Vickers, Tim Settle, Leonard Floyd, Shaq Lawson, Poona Ford, AJ Epinesa. That is a loss of 2,863 snaps out of the 4,732 snaps for defensive linemen in 2023. Percentage-wise, you are losing 60.5% of your defensive line snaps for 2023. There is a lot to fill when it comes to the Bills' defensive line. And because there is so much to fill, it's my top priority for this offseason because the amount of bodies you need and the mix of starters plus depth that you need. If you're just looking at everything right now, even if you wanted to, like, your best case scenario, even if you think Vaughn is going to get back to being Vaughn and he's going to be like edge 1, and even if everybody hit, like Vaughn is going to go back to being edge 1, Groot is Groot, Kingsley Jonathan is going to be a solid edge 3. Cool, you only have 3 edges. You still need more. The defensive tackles. Ed Oliver had a strong year last year. Cool, you bank on that again. Ilianku, you think, cool, he can be a 3rd or 4th dude in the rotation. Solid run stuffer. Maybe he upticks his pass rush pop, but you think he's a solid role player. Cool. And then you're looking at Cameron Klein thinking, he can be a defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid. Maybe he kicks into edge more. Maybe he's going to be useful. Even if all 6 of these guys hit, it's still 6. You have 6 guys. That's it. Problem. But when you factor in the quality and the actual on-field production, that's where the conversation becomes a little more dire for me. Let's start with Von Miller. A lot of ways he could go. My expectation for Von Miller, and I don't think this is setting the bar too high, but my expectation for Von Miller in 2024 is to be edge 3. I think there's a chance he could become a starter again. I think he showed more flashes down the stretch than people noticed. I thought there were some encouraging reps from him, mainly from a movement perspective. Watching him show a little more juice, a little more burst, watching him plant and cut and drive and push off of that knee, watching some of the spin moves, watching some of the timing and things come back. I think it's fair to have higher hopes for Von Miller than I potentially am. I think it's fine to hang your hat on some of the flash and think that with a full offseason under his belt that isn't filled with rehab, just a regular offseason, I think it's fine to hope and expect for him to be like a starting level edge player. But my expectation for him is to be edge 3. I think he comes back as a solid rotational guy. I think his flashes increase. I think his baseline and or floor production increases. But I don't think he's going to get back to that Von level that he was in 2022 before he got hurt. Even if he hadn't got hurt, I don't know if he's going to be that guy. Like, they signed him to this contract to be an impact player in 2022 and 2023. Everything else after that was kind of like, well, if it works out, cool. If not, whatever. They were trying to really crack that window and break it open in 2022 and in 2023. Obviously, Von got hurt in the back half of 2022, was still working back in 2023, so it kind of came out in the wash and was not great. So even if everything worked out in 2022 and 2023, I don't know what kind of Von Miller you were going to get at this point with the miles on the tires for him. So just from a baseline perspective, I think he'll be edge 3 in 2024, which for the purposes of this exercise means you have Greg Rousseau as your top edge on the depth chart, which means at the very least, you need another starting edge. Greg Rousseau, talked about it much on the show, shown in the film room, is elite as a run defender. Legitimately one of the best defensive line run defenders in the league, and then especially for edges, is one of the best run defenders at edge in the entire league. He's still putting things together as a pass rusher. And I know, again, like I mentioned earlier, he was banged up this year. Having a banged up ankle and foot is very much less than ideal considering his build and his frame, really for anybody in football or any sport where your legs are important, but especially for his build and frame. I don't like the idea of him as edge one from a pass rush perspective. I'm fine if that's the way it has to be. But I don't love the idea of him as edge one from a pass rush perspective. I love him as an edge two, pairing him with a real pass rusher with pop off the edge. So again, for me, if Vaughn is edge three and he's a solid rotational guy, Groot is your number two or your kind of de facto one. Ideally, the other starting edge opposite of Greg Rousseau has some pass rush pop to him. So if you're looking at the top four right now, or just let's just say top three based on the conversation we've had, you're looking at Greg Rousseau, in addition, either free agency or the draft, and Von Miller. Those are your top three. You still need an edge four. You still need probably a fifth and maybe a six just for reps and depth to compete with Kingsley Jonathan and or Cameron Klein, depending on if you view him, if they're going to move him defensive end, because I know he's gotten some reps there. So we'll see what that happens. So minimum, you're looking at adding 3 edge players, 2 of which are going to function in your top 4, and 1 of which is going to be receiving quote unquote starter reps alongside Greg Rousseau. That would put you at 6 edge rushers on the roster. So at a bare minimum, you need to add 3 edge rushers this offseason. Now let's go to the interior defensive line. You have Ed Oliver, legitimate starter, very strong 2023. I've talked about the metrics. I've shown the metrics. We've shown the tape, talked about the tape. Tremendous 2023. Yes, I'm also aware that he had a very horrible divisional round against the Chiefs. Joe Thuney ate him up and had him in hell the entirety of that game. Very unfortunate. But Ed Oliver's a legitimate starter. He had a very strong 2023. It's unfortunate how his season ended in terms of performance, along with the Bills season ending against the Kansas City Chiefs. But Ed Oliver, legitimate starter. After Ed Oliver, you've got more bottom tier depth, Elianku and Cameron Klein. Again, Cameron Klein, depending on how you view him, edge, defensive tackle, whatever. I'm putting him in the defensive tackle boat for now because that's how he's listed. It is what it is. Elianku, I like what he's done against the run. He's played in spurts. I like what he did last year against Baltimore in the regular season. I like what he's done in the preseason. I don't think he's ready to be a regular top 4 or top 5 rotational guy on the interior. So just looking at the interior right now, and again, it's even worse. Even if you want to move Klein back to defensive end or move him to edge, cool. You're looking at Ed Oliver and Elianku. Regardless of how you slice it, at a minimum, you need a starting one tech, and you need 2 more rotational pieces to give you a solid top 4 to work with. So you already need to add 3 bodies on the interior because you've got Ed Oliver. Then you need the starting one tech, and then I think you need 2 other top rotational dudes to give you that solid top 4. So you need 3 bodies just from that perspective alone. Then, again, for just bare minimum conversation, let's say you have to add another 2 for depth and competition with Elianku, and depending on how you view Cameron Klein. Maybe even you need to add 3. But again, just for devil's advocate's sake and conversation purposes, at a bare minimum, you need to add 5 interior defensive linemen, 3 of which are going to be important to your defense. 1 is going to be a starter and receive starter reps. The other 2 are going to be solid in that rotation. You basically need to add, I'm not saying add these players. You basically need a Daquan Jones, a Jordan Phillips, and a Tim Settle, or a Daquan Jones, a Tim Settle, and a Poona Ford. You need 3 more top rotational pieces. You need a legitimate starter and 2 solid rotational guys. Just off of that, basic. And then you need more for depth, anywhere from 2 to 3 bodies. But again, just for a bare minimum sake, you need to add 5 interior defensive linemen. So all in all, bare minimum, you need 8 defensive lineman additions between free agency and the draft. Again, I went 3 for edge, 5 for the interior defensive line. And that's the same bare minimum. And that's also not even factoring in the level and quality of the additions that you bring in. I'm not even talking about this guy needs to be great. You need to bring in a starter of this capacity and this skill set. I'm just talking about basic bodies. Just to fill out the roster, bare minimum, you need 8 defensive line additions between free agency and the draft. When you start to factor in the level and the quality of the players that you bring in, that's when things get a little more worrisome, and that opens up a whole nother conversation with anticipated cost and cap space and contracts and so on and so forth. And I don't want to get too much into cap work right now. I talked about it before. That's going to be for the salary cap spectacular, and I don't want to bog more of the schematic conversation with numbers and math. But with the anticipated cost and cap space, you're probably looking at the additions for the defensive line definitely coming in the draft. And then I would expect like multiple 1 year or 2 year deals in free agency. They could be legitimate 2 year deals like a Tim Settle, or they could be a 1 year deal with a void year like Leonard Floyd. And if they get those, say you get those 1 or those 2 year deals, and that's how they choose to round out this defensive line grouping. This is what's also troublesome with me for the defensive line grouping and why I think this is such a big priority as well. I think there's going to be a handful of 1 and 2 year deals on the defensive line, but if you get that, we're back to having a very similar conversation next offseason and the one after. They're going to continue to have to churn out this defensive line grouping year in and year out. I put out a mock draft earlier today, just top 3. And also I want to preface this too, disclaimer, and I said it in the tweet. Mock drafts are useless until free agency happens because team needs are going to change so drastically. But if I have time to kill and I'm just chilling, like waiting for something, I'm like, oh, I'll do a quick mock draft. It could not have worked out better. Yikes for me. I got Byron Murphy in the first round, defensive tackle from Texas. I got Cam Kitchens, safety from Miami in the second round. And I got Javon Baker, wide receiver from UCF in the third. There's no way it works out like that. But I say that to say this. Defensive line is going to be a premium important position for this team. You need, not only do you need bodies, you need high functioning quality bodies, and you also need control and term and cost-effective production on that position grouping, which is why I think defensive line in the first round, as much as it's going to annoy the hell out of everybody, I really think it makes a lot of sense. If Byron Murphy from Texas falls to 28, I'm throwing that pick in there 1,000% every single time, even over Cam Kitchens and Tyler Nubin, who I love. I just don't think Murphy's going to fall, especially after him pulling out of the Senior Bowl. He got wind from his agent or from somebody of them talking about, hey, man, you don't need to be here. You're going to be like a top half of the first round type of pick. Don't even sweat it. Like, no pun intended with T'Vondre Sweat. Like, you don't need to do this. He pulled out last minute because of it. And again, I said it before we started this segment of the episode. I know this is frustrating for so many people. I even see it with Bills Are Lecture right now saying, so to stop Mahomes, we need to pour assets into the defensive line and then aside. And it seems like this is the conversation every year. And I know so many people just want to go full glass cannon and say, no, let's load up on weapons at wide receiver. And, we got Dalton Kincaid, and depending on how you feel about Dawson Knox, but you got Kincaid, you've got James Cook, you've got Stephon Diggs, you've got a good offensive line now. Let's load up on weapons and try and score 40 points a game with Josh Allen. I just don't think it's going to happen with this team. One, like we talked about a couple times on this show, Beane and McDermott both believe in the same team building philosophy. You start from the trenches. And when you talk about the defense, you start from the defensive line out. And there's so many holes on this defensive line. Again, I'm not even getting into the part of the conversation of, quality and scheme fit and skill set. I'm just talking bare minimum bodies. Like, they just don't have the bodies. If you looked at the wide receiver grouping right now, the grouping we just came off of that we talked about in the first segment of this episode, we were talking about, scheme fit and skill set and what you're looking for and role and all of these pieces. But you could still put a wide receiver grouping together right now. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got 8 wide receivers on the roster and under contract for 2024. Now, it's not going to be fun and it's not going to be sexy because you've got Stephon Diggs. Your top 3 are going to be Stephon Diggs, Deontay Hardy, and Khalil Shakir. And then you're looking at KJ Hamler, Justin Shorter, Andy Isabella, Tyrell Shavers, and Brian Thompson. But just from a bodies perspective, you can have a full wide receiver room. The Bills don't have a full defensive line room at all. You've got 3 edges and 3 defensive tackles. Again, depending on how you list Cameron Klein. I saw what Chris said earlier. Yeah, depending on what site you're looking at, he's listed a defensive tackle, defensive end. I don't care. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a functional part. And just for the sake of this argument, cool, however you want to classify him, you're looking at 6 defensive linemen under contract for 2024. So just from a bodies perspective, you don't have enough to put a team together. Even if all of those bodies hit, even if you were looking at 6 all-pros, you're still going to have to add to the defensive line. Like, put that into perspective. Even if all 6 of those dudes were all pros, that's still not enough for a game day rotation on the defensive line. You still would need to add to the defensive line. But all 6 of those guys are not all pros. One of them is Von Miller with significant question marks. One of them is Kingsley Jonathan, who's we still don't really know what he is. Then you've got Ilianku and Cameron Klein. So you don't have 6 all-pros. And even if you did, you would need to add to that position grouping. But because you don't, you have to add even more from a quality and a talent perspective. This is my biggest offseason priority, and there's going to be so much movement that's going to happen here. Again, I anticipate a lot of 1 and 2 year deals in free agency, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the first round, if Byron Murphy was somehow there, I would love that pick. I don't think he's going to be there. But if they went with a Darius Robinson from Missouri, well, Adam comes in and says, "It sounds like we're screwed." I mean, it's not great. But this is funny too. Joe saying, hearing Ant talk about the D line is making me feel the way I did when I first found out about global warming. I like that. That's making me cough. Well played. Well played. Yeah, I feel like I'm in like the war room and I'm Dennis Quaid in The Day After Tomorrow, and you're all the people that are like, well, when is the storm coming? I'm like, tomorrow. Yeah, not great. And again, it's a conversation that I know people don't want to have. Like, it's annoying. It's annoying to year after year be like, well, what are they doing on the defensive line? What are they doing on the defensive line? Hey, what about the defensive line? But it has to happen this year. And again, just from a bodies perspective, they do not have enough bodies to have a functional defensive line in the NFL. Just off of that. Then it gets even more dire because now it's not just like you don't have enough bodies just to field a squad. That's not even taking into consideration quality, talent, scheme fit, all of these pieces. So, Jordan's saying, so what I'm hearing is there's no chance we give up all of our draft picks to go get Marvin Harrison. I mean, you could. And then again, maybe you score 50 points a game and defense doesn't matter and you win every game like 50 to 35, which is possible. No, RJ. RJ says, screw it. Let's play a 3-3-5 on defense. How dare you? Get out of here with that stack. We are not doing that. How dare you? I know you're kidding, but how dare you? Chris saying, Anthony, what do you think about the defensive tackle Newton? Yeah, Jerjon Newton from Illinois. Haven't watched him this year. Watched him and Keith Randolph on Illinois last offseason. I haven't done defensive tackle work for the draft yet, aside from Byron Murphy and from T'Vondre Sweat in my Senior Bowl prep. But I've heard a bunch of good things on Newton. And again, I liked his tape last year. Him and Keith Randolph, I liked a bunch last year. Both dudes from Illinois. So I'm hoping the tape will look nice again. I know he's been mocked to the Bills by a couple people, I think. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills went defensive line in the first round. Again, just because of the need. We know how, and this isn't even, I'm saying I wouldn't be opposed to them doing it, and I'd like them to do it given, again, where we sit right now. There are going to be additions in free agency before we get to the draft, right? So it's not going to be like, these are just the only 6 dudes on the defensive line come draft time. They're going to do something in free agency. But I'm saying all that just to say it's going to get work. Like, even if Bean and McDermott didn't believe in building from the defensive line out, even if they had 6 all-pros already on the roster, even if everything was sunshine and rainbows and perfect, they would still have to add to the defensive line. But it's not sunshine and rainbows. Bean and McDermott believe wholeheartedly in building from the defensive line out. The defensive line is going to get a ton of work in free agency and the draft. And when it comes to free agency, because of the money that they have, I would anticipate a lot of 1 and 2 year deals. I don't think, in before anybody's like, what about Brian Burns? I don't think Brian Burns is coming to Buffalo. Man, that would be awesome. Corey saying, is the Knox contract tradable? No. Next offseason, the dead cap hit is significantly down. I believe. Actually, you know why I'm even saying that? Let me just go stop being lazy and just go check on that right now. Tight end, Dawson Knox. No. This year, if he is cut or traded, doesn't matter. Cut or traded actually some of the pre and post stuff not work. I'll just read them all off. If he gets released before June 1st, it's a dead cap hit of $20 million. If he gets traded before June 1st, it's a dead cap of $11.7 million. If he gets released after June 1st, it is a dead cap hit of $20.3 million roughly. If he gets traded after June 1st, it's a dead cap hit of 11.7. So no matter how you slice it, he's got a significant dead cap hit. Next year, his dead cap hit is only $7.8 million. Pre and post stuff. So that's a lot better when you're looking at it. But no, Dawson Knox isn't going anywhere just because of the contract. Ooh, Braden Fisk. solid week at the Senior Bowl, very solid week at the Senior Bowl. Somebody who myself and Eric Turner both like. We talked about him last week. I'm sure he'll come up on the film room a bunch. But yeah, Braden Fisk is an option there as well. But yeah, man, it's dire to a degree, but it's frustrating as well. Like, again, to know how many resources they pulled, to know that like Boogie Basham didn't work out when they double dipped with him and Rousseau, to see the injuries that they had to Von Miller. Like this grouping looks so different right now. If Basham panned out and Von Miller didn't get hurt, then you have like a solid top three. You're like, okay, cool. Boogie, Groot, and Von. Sweet. Let's like add somewhere else. We got to add like one more edge, maybe two. We'll see what happens. Yada, yada. Yeah, it's a position grouping that, again, is going to need attention. I don't think this should surprise anyone, knowing Beane and McDermott's philosophy, and, again, just kind of laying out what they have. And that's why I wanted to put that in perspective. And, again, now to get into some of the skill set conversation, like I mentioned, so you need that prototypical one tech. Ed Oliver is that three tech. So you need that one tech, that person who's lining up on the inside shoulder of the guard most times in those 4-3 over fronts. Somebody who can withstand double teams, hold strong at the point of attack, take on those double teams, drop the knee, reduce your surface area, split, but also get upfield, get penetration, work some stunts, be able to play off of Ed Oliver. You're looking for Daquan Jones or Daquan Jones's skill set, frame, type, all that kind of stuff. That's what you're looking for at that one tech piece. The rotational spots on the interior can vary. You know, maybe you go more of like an undersized guy as your 3 or your 4, but I think when you're looking at the defensive tackle spot, again, you're looking at Ed Oliver and a Daquan Jones type as your 1 and your 2. And then with 3 and 4, I think you're just looking for guys who kind of do a little bit of everything, or maybe have more of a niche role, but they're going to have to spend resources in order to get that. And we know how this front likes to attack. We know they're a one gap penetrating front. So you're looking for guys who can own their gap, who can leverage their gap, good hand usage, good leverage, the ability to get upfield. You're looking for quickness, even if they do have size. Like guys like Linval Joseph were really kind of outliers in terms of what they look like on the interior. So you're looking for guys, again, quickness, one gapping, penetrating, aggressive, front facing, upfield type of action from your interior players, especially from a depth perspective. On the edge, pocket compressors. But if you are looking for me, if Von Miller is going to be edge 3, I think you need like another Leonard Floyd type to be brought in to rush opposite of Greg Rousseau. I don't think Greg Rousseau is there yet as a pass rusher where he can be your true edge 1, where he's the guy double teams have to go to, or if he's one-on-one, he's winning. Like that was Leonard Floyd last year, where he was just owning everybody, especially in the early part of the year. And so if Von is edge 3, Groot is edge 2, that means you need to bring in a 1 or another 2 who has a pass rush specialty. Like if Greg Rousseau is one of your starters and Von isn't the other, your other starter their dial has to be turned up more from a pass rush standpoint in order to pair well with Gregory Rousseau. And then if you're looking at edge 4, you're looking for that AJ Epinesa type, or maybe you're looking for another Shaq Lawson, somebody who can really set the edge. That can be more niche down and more of that role. But yeah, man, there's a lot of moving and shaking to happen with this defensive line grouping. But I think Beane knew this, and I'm here with you, Brian, saying, really hoping Von is back to being at least solid. Yeah, I would like that. Roy says, do you think Beane uses the 5th-year option on Groot? I would think so, considering how good he's been against the run. And he's not a bad pass rusher. I just don't think he's there to be a true number 1 off the edge from a pass rush perspective. But considering how good he is against the run and how good enough he is as a pass rusher, yeah, I think he uses that 5th-year option.